Welcome to version 2 of the Special Town Council Budget Work Session. Say the Pledge of Allegiance. Harry, would you say the pledge since you're the star?
Oh.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Question before we start.
You bet.
The process by which we'll continue to review and then approve the budget. Will there be additional work sessions for the public after we're done with these two sessions? Or will further discussion be done at the council meetings?
We had one work session already. Grady, why don't you take that?
Thanks, Councilmember Driscoll. Mayor and Council, the question is, are we going to have additional workshops on the budget? What is the process between now and the time that the budget will be adopted? So we had originally a calendar that had a public open house. We held that just recently. And then yesterday was the first of two council workshops on the budget. We have tomorrow as a possibility if we don't get through this today, which we believe we have every right or every belief that we will get through this today. Then we come back. We will make changes per the council direction that we hope at the very end of today. If there's consensus on either additions, changes, or edits to what you've seen before you today and yesterday, we'll go ahead and make changes to the tentative budget, and we'll bring the tentative budget to the council at the May 19th council meeting. And my understanding is that's on as a public hearing, or is that the final adoption is the public hearing?
The public hearing is the final adoption.
Okay, so I'm mistaken. So, but there will be an opportunity for the public to actually engage with the council and bring up issues or concerns. As we mentioned, we only heard from one person about preservation was a big issue for that person. Then we come to the, I believe it's the second meeting in June, and the council will then act on the final budget that's before them. So I hope I answered your question.
Jerry?
There we go. Good afternoon. So I'm going to share some slides. Okay. So I left on the dais for you a copy of a couple additional slides that I added in after some of the discussion that had happened. So this first one is directly from the work session we had on April 3rd, where we talked about preliminary rate study information and the long range forecast. And so this was the numbers that were included in the models related to new debt. So part of what was discussed yesterday was talking about setting up operating reserves for the utility funds once the debt comes down. And so this is what's in the models right now. It's not like anything's set in stone or final right now, but so the current debt, so for wastewater, the current debt is set to be paid off in 2029. The additional debt, we were looking at terms of 20 years, and the peak on the highest balance was going to be in 2030, 2034. Current debt payment of 1.9. With the new debt, the highest level of the debt payments was going to be 1.2 million between the years 2037 and 2047. Cave Creek Water, so that I don't have here like when it all drops off, but it's around that 2029 time period where all the previous debt except for the Phoenix Interconnect drops off. The Phoenix Interconnect is about $650,000 a year for the payments. The New highest debt level would be in 2032 based off of what's in the 5-year CIP and in the model. Current debt payments, the 2.6 million total, including the Phoenix Interconnect loan. The new highest debt payment with all the new debt in at 3.2 million between the years 2035 and 2046. Desert Hills Water, current debt to be paid off 2028. The highest debt balance in 2032 with what's in the model right now, the 10 million. Current debt payment of 1 million and just under 1 million would be the highest between years 2037 and 2046. So I have for you on the next slide. Maybe that's not seeming to want to move. Let me just use that. So also when I looked at the model, because building in the rates, doing the debt financing, spreading the cost over, the little bit of additional general fund subsidies, but then being able to repay that amount. So looking at wastewater, there would actually be enough fund balance in wastewater based off of what's in the model in about fiscal year 2028 to set up a reserve. Cave Creek water would be about 10 years out in 2035, Desert Hills water in 8 years in 2032. So that was a discussion of once the current debt got paid off. So I wanted to bring these numbers back to the forefront of what we're looking at in the model. The discussions that we'll be having today about what we're including, there's definitely a lot of things in CIP that if we're going to do further adjustment, that would bring the numbers down in the model of what we're trying to cover or something else.
How much are those, what's the dollar amount associated with the operating reserves?
I had those on some slides
that's clear.
yesterday. So
3 months.
yes, I was using 3 months of operating.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know, what the numbers were.
698,000 for wastewater, 970, no. I'm looking at the wrong one. Wastewater, 526,000. Cave Creek water, 1.1 million, and Desert Hills water, 753,000.
And why is it taking till 2035 then to get that kind of reserve?
Because of all the debt.
The new debt too.
Because there's a lot of, particularly in Cave Creek water, there are a lot of projects that are in there.
I
think we said it was-
Paying back the loan from general.
Yes, and paying back the loan from the general fund.
Okay,
You explain to me how wastewater funds that. Where's the money come to fund that? Reserve?
So there's part of it that's also in there that we had not talked about yet was that there's the 1/2 cent for Spur Cross. We talked about how that gets allocated, but then there's another 1/2 cent of the sales tax that goes, we've been putting it in wastewater. When you look at the ordinance, it says that it can go to sewer or water. And because of the need and the wastewater fund, that's where it's been going. So you have the 1/2 cent plus the rate increases, and some of the past rate increases were pretty healthy. And a lot of what the costs are, or the charges that we receive in the wastewater fund are fixed. It's really on the non-residential side where you see some volume of water flows that impact what we collect for sewer.
So the wastewater has been a dumpster fire since it was built, with incalculable subsidies, whether it be the 1/2 cent sales tax, general fund subsidies, et cetera. What are we going to do I mean, it seems like we should not be, that money should be going back into the general fund.
So up through June 30, 2020, all of that was forgiven. Council did
Yeah, I
a
voted for that. Yeah.
resolution to approve that.
Yep.
Since then, So I'm having to go off of memory. I want to say it was close to 2 million. And what we're anticipating of in the next couple years, a total of around 4.5 million of a cumulative of the subsidies to the wastewater fund. And then in 2028, 2029, wastewater would actually be able to start repaying those back to the
So
general
they will
fund.
not need general fund subsidies as of 2028 when they're, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And we'll
And-
have, and they'll have enough extra money coming from the half cent sales tax to establish a reserve,
Mhm,
correct?
mhm.
And so, and you said, I was unaware of the ordinance that we're talking about. Sorry, I was where this is going, but you said it could go to either water or wastewater?
Yes.
Isn't
Yes,
it
and the-
Water Infrastructure Fund? Isn't that how it's labeled?
It doesn't actually say infrastructure, so
Oh.
it doesn't have to be that.
Okay.
But, I'm assuming it was administratively, decided that wastewater was where it was most needed.
So
so
we're
that's
still,
where it's been going
we're
all the
still
time.
gonna go have the subsidy. It's going from 1% to 0.5%, correct? Of the sales tax revenue?
So right now, the ordinance says that 0.5
Yeah,
of
so
the
we'll
sales
have-
tax goes to either sewer or water.
But he's saying after like 2028.
After 2028,
The half
we're
cent
still
sales tax goes in
subsidizing the
there.
0.5 cent sales
That, so
tax.
that's still in the model, that would still go into wastewater.
Why wouldn't we just put that money into general fund? Why into water or wastewater? Why, when the deficit in the wastewater is less than what, because that sales tax started out at 900,000 and now it's over 2 million because of the growth in the sales tax.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't we change that ordinance and put that money into general fund where we can do whatever we wanted to with it? Why have these narrow definitions? Because the general fund is going to need it and it doesn't have it. And we're looking at reductions in HERF, reductions in construction sales tax,
State
shared
shared
funds,
revenue.
you name it, everything in the general fund is headed south. The other funds are getting better as far as revenue is concerned.
Right.
So I'd like to hear from council as far as the planning purpose, because this next Wildan run will run past 2028, correct?
Yes, yes. And
And
so we
so-
can model
And
it
so that
assuming
model,
that,
you
yeah.
need that information to
Mhm.
do a good job of modeling that.
yes.
I would like to see that all of the full cent at some point around 2029 or so be taken care of by the customers. In other words, change the rates so they pay their freight. And that should be for both water and sewer. I mean, we shouldn't have to subsidize anything out of the general fund after 2029. I mean, that's,
Well, I agree with you. I agree with that. But I mean, and fundamentally, I think that half cent sales tax is a subsidy. I mean, you got a service and you're subsidizing that service. And, the water fund shouldn't need it. It's gonna start growing, and as we add to the sewer system, that'll need less and less. It would seem like we would want to put that money in the general fund where the problem is.
How quickly can we decide on whether the 0.5 cent goes into the general fund or not?
I mean, it sounds like that's kind of the direction that council wants to go. And so it really wouldn't take long to say that we'll just change the ordinance and have all that money go into the general fund. And in the short term, that may mean that we're replacing that money with general fund subsidy for a little bit, but we can run the models and see how that goes.
Or you can just add general fund to the 3 possible destinations.
I would suggest that we do this as part of when we have the rate analysis that's going to be done and you're going to be in workshops this fall.
Well, Wildan's gonna make,
No, but we'll let them know that for them, when they're doing their forecast, to include that not being part of the subsidy. What I'm trying to get at is the policy itself.
Yeah.
I would like to say that the policy just based on what I'm hearing, the consensus is that we go ahead and just amend the policy to sunset after 2028 or 2029, that it reverts back to the general fund. That way it's done. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Staff will stay on top of it and make sure that that happens.
Yeah, I think the thing we have to be careful of is like a 40% whack, increase in water or sewer. I mean, I'd like to see that at least ameliorated over 3 or 4
So-
years.
So what I'm suggesting is it stay until after we are in this time period where the debt starts getting paid off and we can start building the reserves. And that has to be included in the rate model. So,
Well, and of course, council can subsidize water rates for everything. We've been doing it forever.
right.
So, I mean, and that's so far out, but it does make a difference in that, in the model runs.
And the way that we're looking at it right now is the transfers we're doing from the general fund to help balance the funds, those subsidies are the ones we're looking at paying back. That half-cent sales tax that's going into wastewater is not part of those calculations
Right.
of repaying the general fund.
So for a historical perspective, was the half-cent allocation in both directions for preservation and for the wastewater support, was that done as an additional, did the sales tax go from 2% to 3% when that was added?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Each one.
They've been modified multiple times over the years, but when they initially went into place, those 2 half-cents were dedicated at the time that the rates
Okay.
were increased.
I mean, it seems logical to me that, yes, you would have your TPT revenue come in one lump sum and then decide what you're subsidizing out of the different funds that
Yeah.
need it. As opposed to try and divvy it up ahead of time and then make further adjustments based on what the budget requires.
Yeah, and it's one council years ago trying to tell other councils how to spend the money to some extent. I mean, we could always change that, but having flexibility on what we're gonna do. I mean, we didn't know we needed a fire department 20 years ago. So, and we didn't know that the population would be this much and everybody else was going this way. And so our share of shared revenues is going down.
Right.
So, I mean,
Or we
there's,
didn't know that the cost of water was going to
our cost of water was gonna. triple.
quadruple, if
Yeah.
not more. But I really would like to know if we have consensus. I'm glad Tom Oggerton is here today. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I support what the mayor suggested, or number. Sorry, I always forget to do that. I support what the mayor suggested to the staff earlier for a number of reasons. It's truth in advertising, and it'll give a fair chance, a fighting chance for more forthright expenditure of public money in the community for not only policies that the council has consensus for, but things that are critical to operating a town. And I still hope for the day when the money that was raised as presented at that time, which I know is historic, but it was for open space preservation, environmental protectionism, that type of thing. Because our tax was already pretty high when it was precipitated, and then we double punched, we did the half-cent twice. So if you take the 3 and you add it on to the other taxes, we're 9 point something.
9.6, I think,
So
with
we're pretty-
all the taxes.
It's almost 10%.
Yeah.
And I don't know where we are with bed tax in the community. We still have it. We haven't looked at it in years. I don't know if the rate's competitive, but
We have bed tax, but not rental tax.
Yeah, and my understanding is under state law, that is one that would have to be referred to voters, correct? The bed tax rate. Any adjustments to it, any increase, not the long
So
term,
it's
which just went
currently,
away.
yes, so to go up any further from where it's at right now, yes, it would need to go to the voters and it would need to be dedicated to tourism.
What,
The-
say it again, what's dedicated to tourism?
So any increase to the bed tax rate would have to go towards tourism. And there's a long definition. They call it tourism promotion, but in the definition of what they mean, it's also management of tourism.
Promoting it, so it goes right back into the industry that it's generating.
A follow-up question, are we doing bed tax on Airbnbs?
Yes.
We are. Any rough idea what, under the new system that Teresa started? How much income that's roughly generating?
Do you?
223,000.
Good job.
Real money.
Yeah.
Let's ask Teresa to look for some other things to. Just kidding.
Get to work, Teresa.
She's a ventriloquist, by the way. You didn't know that, did you?
What's that?
She's a ventriloquist. She-
Oh, I saw her.
She had
voice.
Sherry
Or
say
for
it
the
for
number.
everybody.
It's a good act.
Well, we're going to go ahead and move on. We have a lot to cover. Something I just want to say today, though, as you saw with the integrated utility master plan for the 3 utilities, we have a boatload of different projects, $45 million, I believe. There's been a lot of reshuffling and reprioritization. I think the thing to walk away from today or take away from today is that what we're really trying to do is we're trying to set basically our budget and our debt ceiling. I'm sorry, not debt ceiling, but our cap on our budget for next fiscal year. Council's going to have some opportunities in budget workshops, or I'm sorry, utility rate workshops leading up to setting the new utility rates this fall before they're actually set. And so recall when we had Jim Brown's here, I mentioned that we had some more pencil sharpening that we had to do related to the capital projects that were in the utilities. So what I'm trying to get at is if the council were to approve the CIP without modifications today, or if there's some modifications that you wish to make or reprioritize, that's fine. But we're not going to be having, other than the Phoenix Interconnect and some, minor, like major capital, I'm sorry, major maintenance that are just part of the routine budget. We're not going to proceed with any of those CIP projects until we get your explicit approval going forward. Anything that we do is going to have to come back to you anyways. So all I'm trying to say is we're going to try to get through this, but if we can't, or you feel like you're being rushed, you're still going to have this another shot at this when it comes before you when you're looking at rates. Because the rates that you saw when Jim Rounds was here and we had Wildan, Kevin with Wildan present, that was a pro forma model, but that was not finalized, and we're going to have to do more shifting and trying to get those numbers down. So I don't know if that makes sense what I said, but again, we need to get a budget done on time. And part of the issue is I think it's going to be a challenge going through this today. Even if we need tomorrow, I still think that there's a lot of questions that where our financial advisor is going to have to look at and things like that. And that's where he's going to be involved behind the scenes on the rate modeling that Wildan's going to be doing. So I hope that's clear. Okay.
Can I
Yes.
just ask a quick question? Where are we with the abstract discussion about privatizing the town water company? Is that, it's not part of the budget process, but is that something in 2025 that's going to be examined? Because you just mentioned $45 million is our next investment.
So 45 million over the next 25 years.
Oh, over 25 years.
25 years,
Okay.
but there's a lot of this that's front loaded that we're needing to kind of push out. And Sean did a good job of pushing back and deferring some of those, but there's a number of things that he, as you'll see today, there's a number of things that he's calling it imperative, meaning that there are things that have to be done pretty soon. Back to your question, we have a water strategies workshop on the 28th, and we're going to talk and share with you some of the additional water resources that we're trying to add to our water portfolio. And the council is going to have a good opportunity to give us some guidance and direction on some of the things that you see. So, so your question there, I think, fits more appropriately in that discussion.
Is there an executive session along with that?
There will be. I think right now we just have the workshop scheduled, but since there's been some updated information we just learned about on the Harquahala, and some other legal issues, we need to have an E-session on that.
Yeah, I think we ought to have an exec session.
Ready to move on?
We haven't started yet.
Well, we went through 2 slides. So we've done a little bit. Okay, so for wastewater, looking at the operating budget with the base budget changes, fiscal year 25 budget going from just under 3.6 million to 3.9 million for fiscal year 2026. The increase in personnel costs is about 30,000. We are experiencing increases in what the utility costs that we pay for electric and water and all of that. So that's 62,000. I mentioned yesterday about how we're doing indirect cost allocations to the utility funds instead of the direct charges. So there's 243,000 in indirect cost allocations and then some miscellaneous changes. As far as the CIP projects, so the first one on the list is for the manhole rehab program. Most everything on this list is assuming that there's some debt financing involved, and this would be one. So as we talked about in the work session on April 3rd, basically everything that could potentially be debt financed was set up in the model as being debt financed, and it was still requiring some general fund subsidies on top of the rate increases. So this is reflected here of how that was set up in the model. The manhole rehab program, so that's budgeted at 150,000 each year. The collection system improvements also at 150,000 each year, and that also being debt financed. The reclaimed water exchange with Phoenix, so that is also in here as being debt financed. Wastewater treatment plant equipment improvements, again, debt financed. The retrofit of existing neighborhoods. So with the sewer lines, the fiscal year 29 and 30 were debt financed. That 50,000 in fiscal year 27 was assuming that it would just be covered with wastewater revenues. And then the Chuparosa lift station improvements, also debt financed. And there was enough projects that I had to split this up between multiple slides. So before I move to the next slide, was there anything that you wanted to discuss here?
Why is the retrofit existing neighborhood line item for fiscal year 30, 2.1 million?
Mayor and Council, so that project, that's the first stretch to allow us to extend the sewer, trunk sewer, and this would capture the neighborhood for Estado de Choya 1 and 2. So it's going from the treatment plant going to the east. The second phase, which actually we show in the next 5 years of the CIP, which you currently don't see, would be to extend that sewer to pick up the Canyon Ridge sewer. So we're thinking in 27 is we actually have a couple of easements to get purchased. So we thought we might not do some preliminary work next year internally. In 27, we'd actually secure the easements, and then we'd start 29 would be the design of the sewer, and then $2.1 million is actually the sewer construction. So it's a new 10-inch trunk sewer that goes out the north end of the treatment plant and then turns to the east. I forget the name of the neighborhood. It's directly east before we get to Estado de Choya, but it gets us through Estado de Choya all the way to 50th Street with this sewer extension. And then we have to connect the next gap, and that's the next 5 years. That's the goal, is to get those new sewer, those existing customers who are on septic, but have dry sewers in them to allow them to start connecting those together to the treatment plant.
So I'm assuming that that as the septic system goes bad, we just have them connect to the sewer.
That's how current town code reads, is that for residential properties, unless the sewer, the septic system fails and it's not repairable, then they have to do the connection. So that'd be a discussion with council whether or not they want to look to change in town code and want to encourage those properties to actually make those connections sewer as soon as it's live or not. So it's a discussion we brought up during the master plan, but the current town code is you have for residential properties until the system fails, then they have to come to us, get a permit. We can't issue that permit, so they have to connect to the sewer and abandon the septic system.
It seems like a sewer connection would be a heck of a lot cheaper than putting in a new septic system.
I'd probably agree with you there, and then we could probably look at things like our capacity fees. When we developed the capacity fees in calendar year 22, we didn't have that many connections going onto it, so it's probably a look at that. So our capacity fees for the sewer are actually fairly high right now, so we could relook at that. If we're getting at another group of connections onto it, we could look at that fee and lower that fee, because that's one of the bigger fees right now is the sewer capacity fee for connection to the sewer system. These properties did not pay that. The developer put the infrastructure in, but they didn't pay the individual fees that were due at the time of the connection. So that's still an outstanding issue to get resolved. But I think we should look at the capacity fees as were developed, because we didn't assume these neighborhoods were going to be connected on when we did that calculation back in 22.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it all gravity flow?
Yes, it will be
Oh.
gravity flow.
What are you gonna do with the pressure line? Are you gonna move the?
Well,
The
we have the
discharge.
plans eventually with the second phase is to actually extend it up through along New River Road, and we can actually pick up the pressure line. I'm assuming you're referring to the Rancho Minana lift station
Yeah.
force main. So instead of having to come down to the intersection, we can actually pick it up at New River Road. So we could use that second section as a redundant backup, which we obviously had the failure on, but we can bring the new section, and the sewer's designed to actually take that Rancho Minana flow through the back end of the plant.
Good.
Sean, quickly, do you have any idea how residents are going to respond to this proposal?
We've had a few in the state of Cholla that's talked to us, because we've had some septic systems that have people had to do repairs on, and they're asking about it, and they can see the manholes out in the street. So as far as answering, bringing this forward, we have not done that outreach and saying this is the town's goal, except a master plan. So we probably should start that outreach and have that discussion with them, let them know it's coming.
Yes,
And
that was my
obviously-
point
Yeah.
that I didn't express.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
Got it.
Yeah, we can do some outreach,
Big
and work
heads
with
up
Bo,
on
we can
that.
do some outreach and let
Yeah,
them know that.
good thing Bo's here, yeah.
Yeah, obviously you've got, it's 5 years for this, and then I think we have the next sewer improvement was another years 8, 9 at this point, whether we can move those up or not. But then it's probably good to just have discussions with those neighborhoods.
You
Yeah.
might
Don-
also want to take a look at the houses on Black Mountain at sometime about 10 to 15 years from now, look at laying a sewer line up there, because most of those septic systems are in the process of failing now.
Good point. In the master plan, we looked at sewer layout up there, so we do have that. That would be another thing that we'd have to figure out how to fund and build it. That's actually a very expensive. Well, it's about, I think it's $6.5 or $7 million to get out to New River Road and Cave Creek. It's another 10 plus to actually do Black Mountain sewer, just because of the digging conditions. So we'd like to continue that conversation with council to see what you want to do, because obviously it's a large project, and whether that become an improvement district or some other way we fund it to something to look at in the future. If we want to bring those customers into the system, I think the town needs to help that process along.
Sean and I have talked about incentivizing to make it better, and then whatever the cost might be, if we can come in with maybe a lower cost, since part of the system's already there. And just having something appear on their bill, like the assessment for that just is on their bill, like there's an assessment on the property, and then it's just in their utility bill going forward. But it makes sense to get them all in as quickly as you can, versus when you start piecemealing it, you need to really have those flows going into the sewer to be efficient. And it doesn't make sense just, have a bunch of one-offs when they decide to connect. So I think we need to put together a strategy and a plan, and also cost benefit it to see how we can do this, where both we're not having further subsidies, and also they're paying their full freight, but make it affordable for them to do so.
We also need to see, before we get too far on there, will the fees from the houses cover the debt payments on $17 million? Whatever that your total number is?
Oh, between the two areas. Yeah, we'd probably have to look at all those, do that.
Well, I
those
mean,
calculations.
that's what I mean. Before we
Has to be done.
start talking to neighborhoods, let's do the economics.
So I said cost benefit. I meant
Yeah.
analysis, but
Yeah.
you're right.
Ready to move on? Okay, so on the next slide, some more wastewater CIP projects. The force main assessment and cleaning. So since this is really more doing studies of of what the lines look like and not really a capital project, then it assumes that a general fund subsidy would be needed to cover the cost of this project. The replacing the odor control units at the plant, debt finance, that's out in 2028. The Rancho Manana irrigation efficiency upgrade study. So again, that assumes a general fund subsidy in 26. Inspecting dry sewer areas, again, that's really subsidy, but at that point, general fund subsidies would not be needed, so it would be wastewater revenues covering that cost. And then the Chuparosa lift station force main improvements would assume that that is debt financed. And on the next slide, so we have improvements for the Rancho Manana lift station to be debt financed, and the last project, collection system evaluation. So again, this is more of a study, and so it assumes that general fund subsidy would be needed to cover that cost. So for total cost of CIP in wastewater for fiscal year 26, we're looking at $1,440,000. So operating base budget changes for Cave Creek Water. So going from a budget of 5.9 million in fiscal year 25 to 7 million in fiscal year 26. It actually ends up being a net decrease in personnel costs of about 21,000. The utility costs increasing 44,000. Indirect cost allocations would be 426,000. The increase in debt service because of the coming online of the interconnect loan, it's an increase of 686,000, and then some miscellaneous changes there. So there are some supplemental requests that really touch almost all the utilities on each one of these. And the first one starts on page CC-5. They put in the Cave Creek Waters section as being part of where the majority of these costs are, but they are split. So this first one with the water conservation is split 50-50 between Cave Creek Water and Desert Hills Water. I do have a note there. So the assumption is that it would require general fund subsidy for Cave Creek Water and continued cash loan for Desert Hills Water to be able to implement this. The 200,000 that's requested includes startup of the program of 100,000 that would be one time, and then the ongoing costs estimated at 100,000. And this is recommended by the town manager. The utilities department is needing an additional vehicle. So this is not a replacement vehicle, it's adding a vehicle to their fleet. So estimating a one-time cost of 40,000. And so that is split 25% to wastewater, 50% to Cave Creek Water, 25% to Desert Hills Water. And these would require the general fund subsidies and cash fund loan to Desert Hills. That one is recommended. The civil engineer. So the original proposal that you have in your books was assuming that it would need to be contracted and estimated at 312,000. The town manager has recommended attempting to set this up as an actual employee position, which reduces the total cost to 178,000. This would be split 20% to wastewater, 40% to Cave Creek Water, and 40% to Desert Hills Water. And again, it would require those subsidies and loan from the general fund in order to accomplish that,
Is that a project manager?
essentially.
Yes, with all these projects that are planned, it would be primarily spent on staying on top of the capital improvement projects for the utilities.
I'm not sure what CC 8 to CC 9 means, but you've
Those
got
are
to
the
have,
Page numbers in your
oh,
book.
page number. Oh, I
Yeah.
thought maybe it was a employment code of some kind.
Yeah.
It can Sean, can you get someone who has actually managed projects at that? Right?
Mayor and council. So yeah, we looked at neighboring jurisdictions and what they're paying for. This would be a civil engineer position, someone who's got a few years of experience, and we made this salary comparable because we're going to be competing in the market.
Okay.
So that's our goal, is to hopefully cast our nest and get some net and get someone up here to help out. We're looking for someone who's a professional registrant to help out run the projects, because it does help with managing some of the stuff.
And so the next supplemental, so the request was for a management analyst position for a total cost of $144,000. The town manager has recommended starting this position as a part-time position. So the reduction in cost would bring that down to $61,000. The split on the position would be 25% to wastewater, 50% to Cave Creek Water, 25% to Desert Hills Water, and again, would require the subsidies and general fund loan to Desert Hills.
So Sean, do you want to kind of explain this position? My understanding is with all the water conservation efforts, that this position is going to do a lot of that.
Yeah, with our current staff, Mayor and Council, you see Nick in the audience with us, so we're really doing a lot of good things, but I'm realizing we're going to be short-staffed to deal with stuff, especially when we get into the water conservation efforts and things like all the information we're going to gather from the new automatic metering infrastructure, AMI meters, the Neptune meters. So we need someone to be who can be looking at that right now. Staff are looking at it. Existing staff, myself, Ryan, Nick. This would be an extra body to help us focus on that, and actually also help us with things like invoicing. Takes a lot of time. About half the town's invoicing comes through utilities, so we have to it takes some time to do some of that stuff. So we're looking for a management analyst level position to help us manage all the data running the utilities. Again, we're getting it done now, but we're not getting it done efficiently. So that's why we think we needed, again, I made the original pitch for a full-time employee. Grady thought that we should start at least with a half-time and then build the position up.
So the.
Part-time's a great way to go. I think a lot of towns use that extensively.
Yeah.
And you don't pay a pension.
Well,
Less than 20 hours.
if it's 20 hours or more, you do,
Yes.
but it's pro rata, it's not.
Usually you'll get a retired person who did this for their
Right.
career. And they could double dip into ASRS.
So
So the rate models did include the assumptions based off of what the town manager's recommendations were, so they are built in. to
With
those
all these
numbers.
expenses, we're still getting out of the subsidy business in the water companies
Yes,
with the rates that we've seen so far, this 8%, 9%.
correct. All right, so on the totals for the supplemental request, so the portion for wastewater, the requested amount was 128,000, Cave Creek Water 344, Desert Hills Water 285. The grand total on that is over 700,000. Recommended portion 539,000 and 217 with the adjustments that the town manager has made brought that total down. So, in the Cave Creek water section, there are projects in here that, a few of them are split between multiple funds. But they're put here to show as a whole project instead of pieces of projects. The first one on the list here is the new Water Ranch office. For fiscal year 26, 150,000. So I believe that's maybe a little bit of wrapping up, but also furnishing the office is a big part of what that is. So those costs actually are being partially split with Public Works and then wastewater and Cave Creek Water. And to cover those amounts for wastewater and Cave Creek Water, general fund subsidies would be used.
As we roll into, potentially financing a new building, could we get how many people are located where?
You bet. I don't think that should be an issue.
So on the Phoenix Interconnect. As we move along in time and have more and more concrete information on things, numbers change. And there's always a point in time where it's like, okay, like we have to put a number down. We can't keep changing the number or we'll never actually get anything put together and adopted. So Phoenix Interconnect, so this is one that Sean's taken another look at the numbers, and fiscal year 26 looks like maybe it'll be 8,677,000, so a fair difference on that. The numbers, as we had previously discussed, based off of what was originally submitted, looked like that we were not going to use about 2 million of the loan. With the changes in the numbers, it's looking like it's probably closer to maybe 1.5 million that we won't use of the loan. And we will, we've checked with WIFA just preliminarily of, would we be able to utilize the balance of that loan, which is at a decent rate, towards other projects. So there is that potential.
So that 49, 44, 242 is changed to what now?
8,677,000. And before we come with the tentative budget, there could be other CIP projects that there could be a little bit of shifting around, because when a project is already in process and trying to guess, okay, where exactly are we going to be at a defined date of June 30? Well, maybe the project will move a little quicker, maybe it'll move a little slower. And so that dividing line of how much do you put in one year compared to the next year is always a little difficult. And the closer you get to the date, the easier it feels like it is to try and come up with an estimate. So I'm used to those numbers changing.
No, I'm just attributing to, the extra 50% for Cave Creek discount.
Can I ask you a quick question? What's the best number currently for this project that we estimate?
20,900 something thousand. Or no, 20,594,000.
2025?
So 20.6 million total.
Correct. So on the Phoenix Interconnect, so there is the congressionally directed spending grant that we received of $2 million that goes towards this project, and a portion of it we're expecting to spend in 26, and then also the WIFA loan to cover that. So no general fund subsidies for that at all. Wastewater treatment plant upgrades and improvements in fiscal year 26. So the assumption is that we would use the water infrastructure TPT sales tax money. This was the half-cent spur cross money that then whatever's left over, 100,000 goes to trails, and then we split 50-50 between general fund and the water infrastructure. So it's really kind of just, well, this project is one that would likely be continuing to move forward. So to attribute and say, okay, we'll use that water infrastructure money. But it is a little bit of a random process to assign that and figure out what the balance would be. So until we are ready to move forward with projects, then we would be more defined on that. The well rehab program. So this assumes debt financing used. That is 1.4 million in fiscal year 26. And the vehicle replacement program.
So going back to the well rehab program, I'm assuming that means we're actually going to get water out of the wells beginning in FY 27.
Mayor and Councilmember, yeah, that is the goal. So we've tested one well. We're actually gonna be testing our second well casing starting next week. And then we've got the third one should be tested before the end of the fiscal year. So then the goal is with the $1.4 million, that would allow us to, once we do the testing, that allows Clear Creek to develop the scope for what pumps and motors and everything else we need. So we have next 12 months to actually get the equipping done and get water into the system by.
Do we have any idea how much water we can pump out of there legally?
Just at this point, the one well, the right well, which is tested at 200 gallons per minute. The other two legally actually are don't have they're prior to 1980 Groundwater Management Act, so it really is limited by the aquifer. The prior numbers on the Pee Wee well was about 100 gallons a minute, and the other well was about 100 gallons a minute.
So how many acre feet a year is that?
200 gallons a minute would give you about 200 acre feet annually.
So
Our
we're
problem is
looking
that
at-
once we turn them on, we think they're going to decrease pretty
So
quickly.
we're looking at about 400 acre feet roughly.
Potentially, but usually when you do wells, you do what's called firm capacity. You always derate them. You have to turn them off, let them rest, and do other stuff
Understand.
if they're out of service.
So
Yeah,
maybe
potentially.
300 acre feet.
Yeah, potentially, but
Okay.
we don't think
It's-
that'll be a long-term solution for us, but it'll
No,
help us
but-
bridge the gap.
Hey, everything helps.
Anything
When
else?
we have our workshop coming up, you'll see that that is part of one of many near-term solutions, is to fill that gap with the reductions that we're going to likely see.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I mean, I'm roughing out a cost here. I'd like to see us start talking these terms too, by the way, but 1.4 million divided by 400 acre feet is 3,500 per acre foot. That's about 15% of what we're looking at to buy water. I mean, it is unfortunate,
Yeah,
there's
I
not
know,
much of
it's-
it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna get worse before it gets better.
And then the last project on this slide is for the vehicle replacement program specific to utilities. And so on this, we're assuming that the utility revenue would be used. And there's no vehicles up for replacement in fiscal year 26, but there is fiscal year 27 through the remainder of the 5-year plan. Okay, so moving on, the 38th Street booster replacement. That's budgeted for fiscal year 26 and assumes that the water infrastructure TPT money would be used. The pressure zone 9 fire booster also in fiscal year 26. So this assumes, again, water infrastructure TPT used, and then there's also 350,000 of cost sharing from the developer that is anticipated to go along with this project.
38th Street boosters on the west side.
Yes, Mayor, Council Member, 38th Street serves the 38th Street north of Cloud Road, so it's on the west side. It's
So it's
right-
gonna serve is that gonna ameliorate some of the problems that those folks have with having to haul water?
No, that's we refer to that as the DeWitt area, the domestic water improvement area. That's on 24th Street, 26th Street. So these are existing customers. There's 25 or 30 customers currently tied off of 38th Street that are on a booster station that doesn't meet domestic demands or provide for any fire protection. So this is replacing a booster station. The next booster pump station for the west side DeWitt people will actually come when Cahava Springs develops their booster station, which will be at 24th Street and Joy Ranch will be the first booster pump station.
We have an idea when that might be.
I actually just got the design report emailed to me this morning. So I understand the trustees looking to sell the property. They're putting together some of the preliminary engineering. So when they sell the property, they have it all together. We're supposed to be coming back to council here. Actually, the pre-annexation development agreement expires actually in a few months. So I think they're talking about doing an extension and or modification of that. But it sounds like they've got some serious interest in people who want to develop in Cahava, but for them to develop, they actually build a booster pump station. So they'll be forced to do those improvements earlier in their process.
So are we gonna make them do it early before they start building houses?
Before they go rural, they should actually have it up
All
there.
right.
They should, yeah, we gotta get that line moving water up there
I mean, those guys have been waiting, what, 20 years?
at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the third project on the list, the CAT booster, apologize for the typo, station and pipeline upgrades. So this project is over a 3-year time period, and it assumes that the water infrastructure TPT would be used. The rehab of the 6-inch water line across the Cave Creek Wash. So that's in later years and assumes that it would be a combination of the water infrastructure TPT and debt financing. And then the water system improvement program So nothing in 26, but 150,000 each year thereafter. And that one, assumes that the water infrastructure TPT money would be used. So we have in here, based off of an assumption of moving forward with the Bartlett Dam project. I know no decision has been made, but it was actually included in the modeling for the rate study. That was one of the things that we had that. We have all the various projects that are here were all included in that modeling. So if some of these things aren't done, then that would reduce what the need is for some of the rate increases or subsidies. The so the Bartlett Dam, so there's general fund subsidy and then debt financing for the construction portion. The 44,000 in fiscal year 26 is part of what we committed to with the feasibility study. And there's an additional 44,000 in fiscal year 27. The remainder of the cost would be our share of construction. The zone one pipeline improvements, so this assumes debt financing used that is programmed for fiscal year 27. Rebuilding zone 6 pressure reducing valve and replacing 2-inch water line in fiscal year 26. That assumes that we would use water infrastructure TPT money and some debt financing to cover that. The upgrades at the Carroll Heights booster site. So that's in fiscal year 27, and again, would be a combination of water infrastructure, TPT, and debt financing. The zone 9 pipeline improvements. So some money in fiscal year 26 and in fiscal year 30 is out when we would assume that debt financing would be used. The amount in fiscal year 26 would be covered with general fund subsidy. Okay, so moving on, we have zone 8 pipeline improvements. So that project starting in fiscal year 27. It does assume that water infrastructure TPT money would be used. The Galloway booster station upgrades. So this assumes debt financing starting in fiscal year 26 and construction in 27. Next one, zone 4 to zone 1 pressure reducing valve improvements in fiscal year 26. That assumes debt financing. Wastewater treatment process upgrades to the membranes. I know Sean's talked about the Paul filters and it's associated with that. Debt financing is assumed, and fiscal year 30. I think that was really just the design, and then the big dollars are beyond our 5-year plan here. Aeration system for the Phoenix Interconnect Reservoir in fiscal year 27 of the 750,000, and that actually does assume that it would be Cave Creek water revenues covering at that point in time. The evaluating additional groundwater wells for both Cave Creek water and Desert Hills water. That would be a split. And so it assumes that general fund subsidy would be needed for the Cave Creek water portion, and that the cash loan for the other portion for the Desert Hills water. The Phoenix ASR recharge storage in fiscal year 26. So that does assume that Cave Creek water revenues could be used to cover that project. We have new Colorado River water rights program for fiscal year 28. That assumes that debt financing would be needed. The Rockaway Reservoir aeration system in fiscal year 28. That assumes that we would be able to cover it with Cave Creek water revenues. The new Neary booster pumps. So that assumes debt financing needed in fiscal year 26.
Colorado River rights are in the the model, the rate
Yes.
model?
They're in the rate model.
Okay.
Then a new West Cave Creek water line. So this assumes a split with the Desert Hills Water, and general fund subsidy and loan and debt financing would be used for these costs. So starting out in fiscal year 26, which is mostly the start of studying that and then getting into design and construction in the later years. The rehab of 8-inch water line across Cave Creek Wash, starting in fiscal year 26, going into 27. So that assumes debt financing. And we have in fiscal year 28, we'd be ready to do another integrated utility master plan. So hopefully there's not another additional 45 million in projects. Hopefully it's says that there's not a whole lot more, but that does assume a split with wastewater and Desert Hills water in addition to Cave Creek water. The Cave Creek Road pipeline improvements, starting in fiscal year 29. That assumes water infrastructure, TPT, and debt financing in order to be able to accomplish that. And then also included in the rate model and what we have here, so Harquahala groundwater, starting in 2,600,000 and fiscal year 27, the 4 million. So it assumes general fund subsidy and debt financing in order to be able to accomplish that. So the grand totals on the projects that we have here in this section. So over 10 million for fiscal year 26, 10 million again in 27, 13.8 million in 28, and then you start seeing some of these numbers going down. So as Grady had mentioned, there's a lot of front loading of these projects.
So it's only $10 million next year?
Correct.
Because it sounds like a lot more than that.
Yes.
And we have to have the ability to execute, not only spend money, but spend it wisely. And we want these projects, we want bids, multiple, we want to hit the best practices in project management because this is a lot of money.
Yes. And the staff capacity to be able to handle this many projects as well.
And they're all different projects, so you're split, there's one a month. So moving on to Desert Hills Water. So for the operating base budget changes, so fiscal year 25, over 3.7 million, fiscal year 26, going up about 100,000 to over 3.8 million. There's a net decrease in personnel costs, a little bit of an increase in utility costs, and some increases in the operational supplies and bulk water purchases. The larger number here is the indirect cost allocations, 211,000 in that. So 3% change for Desert Hills Water.
Can I ask a dumb question? Has anybody ever calculated how much more the town has to pay every time APS does a rate increase? Because you start to look at some of these numbers, and I know we're all doing it as ratepayers, but it's almost like you want to disclose to the public that through no responsibility of municipal government, the cost of providing energy to the things that the town provides is going up at a rate that is probably more than CPI and probably more than, I mean, it just seems like it's now a factor for doing business. I just wonder if for fun, the finance department would like to calculate trends. It just, I mean, I went from $300 summer bills for a month to $600, which I would call 100% increase, even though that may not be representative, but you add up some of these numbers here for town government and, I mean, I don't know if you calculate fuel costs, but it's like the private sector is recently increasing the price of trash collection based on their environmental fuel fee, which went up about 15% this month. It's just, I find it interesting because it's a calculation which helps people understand the cost of living in terms of even government, you know. So that's all. I just wanted to raise the issue rhetorically, that's all.
And the increases in each one of the three utilities of the utility costs that they are paying. I believe most of it is increases in APS.
Yeah, on our side, Mayor and Council, yeah, APS, we factored that in. We actually looked at it last year and we've looked at this year. So we've got to the point where we can't absorb it anymore by moving budget numbers around. So we're asking for increases. Our chemical costs have increased also. Electrical costs have gone up. Raw water costs, the cap water costs continue to rise, and then, employment costs. So it is a challenge for us, and we try to, be prudent as we can, but we come to a point where, we build those into the rate model in 22. We made assumptions of those increases, but we have to actually solidify them with the budgeting process. So, but yeah, it's something we look at monthly. Actually, we look at all the bills and see them going up.
So the list is shorter for CIP projects in Desert Hills. The water system improvement program. So this assumes debt financing is used and it's 150,000 in each of the 5 years. The steel storage tank reconditioning upgrades, again, debt financing is assumed there. And so that's going from fiscal year 26 all the way through 29. The water meter replacement, so that assumes that debt financing would be needed. There's money in fiscal year 26 and 27. Service line replacements, again, assumes debt financing needed. The wellhead arsenic treatment system assumes debt financing would be needed, and that's one of the larger dollar projects here in the Desert Hills water. So 1.9 million for the construction in 27. Galvin well improvements, again, assumes debt financing out in fiscal year 30, and the Third Avenue well improvements in fiscal year 30 as well. And again, assumes debt financing.
The debt financing here is not going to be guaranteed by our general fund, though. Is that correct?
So nothing is really like determined as specifically how all of this would be done at this point in time. We would do it in the time when we're ready to move forward with these. And
We need to consider the implications of that very carefully. Having
Yes,
our
yes.
general fund,
Mhm.
off the top of my head, I'm against it, but I haven't seen it.
And Desert Hills, with the current debt that they have, their times coverage is better than what Cave Creek Water is. So they're almost 2.5 times right now. And
So
the
they may.
dollar amount of the debt is a lot less.
Okay.
So it could potentially be covered with times coverage. Okay. All right, so before we move on, and I did intend to insert a slide there, but we wanted to just kind of do a little recap on what things that we have heard, and you want to cover some of that, or?
Yeah, so yesterday, we heard from the council, I think loud and clear about the 40th anniversary. So if the consensus is for us to move forward, we'll have that as an item that will support. We're going to reduce the recommended funding from 40,000 to 10,000. Is that what I heard consensus to be? And we will also share with you some ideas and suggestions on how we can do that. As I mentioned yesterday, that will be our theme for a lot of the things that we do. We have that annual volunteer dinner, and that will be the theme for that. And maybe we have some little special designed lapel pins that have a 40th on it or something like that. Budget books, the parade. A lot of things that we do will be 40th anniversary themed, and we don't really need to spend as much money on that because it's not like a 50th anniversary or 25th. The other thing that we heard from the council yesterday, I wasn't sure if there was consensus, but it appeared that there might be, and that had to do with there was quite a bit of discussion on the procurement position. Just wanted to make sure that we know going forward whether we make a change to the tentative budget on that. Whether it stays or it's not in, or just want to run that by the council before we make changes to the tentative budget. So was there any further discussion on that? We know how the mayor feels.
I have to see numbers. How much are they going to buy? Does the amount that we buy justify having a position?
Okay.
That's it's a numbers issue. You have to be able to pay that out with savings somewhere. It's just like any other position. It's got to pay itself out. That's mine. I'm probably in the minority there, but that's my position.
And that position would not specifically be involved in project management at all, just procurement?
No, it's really, what it would be involved though, Sherry and I were talking about this earlier. One of the things that we do not do a very good job of is stay on top of development agreements. It's like a contract compliance issue. And so it would be that, and also ensuring that the town is complying with the grants that we receive. But a lot of the grant agreements that we sign off on, there's typically covenants, and that's not just for this position, that also be finance would be involved in that. But I believe it's important for us. We haven't really, that's a weakness I think that we have, that we need to stay on top of that, because a lot of times there are obligations or things that we need to do. And we also need to make a note that this agreement's going to expire, or will be expiring or has expired. So we don't need to have that in our books, so to speak, to track. So really, in my opinion, there's a really tremendous amount of work and effort that this will save our department directors. When you look at the organization, we are very flat. We have directors. We don't have mid-management. We don't have, we have only a handful of first-line supervisors. So this, I think, will really help free up the staff to do their jobs. But the mayor has asked for some numbers, and I'll try to see what we can do. Maybe when we bring you to the tentative budget, we'll maybe have the numbers by that time.
How much purchasing activity is going to go through there, and what we need to save to rationalize that salary?
Well, I think,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. Hal's last slide yesterday was an indicator of why we need this position and why I'm in support of it. Regarding the fleet replacement program, for 2026, we're going to buy a new skid steer loader for 100,000, a new water truck for 275, a new roll-off truck for 270. In FY 2027, a new road grader for 600,000 and a new dump truck for 275. In FY 2028, a new steel drum roller for 100,000, a new vehicle to replace the Tahoe for 100,000, a new backhoe for 175,000, a new water truck for 250,000. In 2029, 2018 Ford F-250 for 125,000, and a new vehicle to replace the 2018 Ford for 130,000. And then finally, in FY 2030, a new backhoe for 190,000. I mean, we're talking obviously over $1 million just in new vehicles. I think we need a person who can acquire those vehicles at the best rate possible and ensure all the accountability and all the regulations that are required by the state to acquire those vehicles. That's just one example.
Would this person also be working with Sean on acquiring stuff for the?
Yes, in fact, the challenge will be that Sean's staff, he and Nick, and assuming this project manager are hired, will have to help develop the scope of work, obviously, for the projects and all that. But this person will be able to utilize various different means to kind of go out and try to find the deals on this. Obviously, we'll be involved in drafting the RFPs, If there's any professional services doing the request for qualifications, which is very strict under state law, having to ensure that we follow that to the T, and integrate and working very closely with our town attorney to make sure that on these big major projects that everything looks like it's copacetic before it hits the streets on solicitation. So to your, yes, it will be, and you saw, next year alone, I think it was close to $10 million just on the utility side. Not saying we're going to come back to you in the fall, but it's going to be a significant number just on the utility side of projects that are going to have to be bid out.
So just what we were talking about with what the vice mayor said and what Sean is looking at,
Mhm.
and I'm not including the road paving projects here because I think we're up to about 15 million a year.
That's probably a good number,
And so
For-
this
yeah,
this
for a
person would
position.
help us.
right?
That costs about $150,000 a year for this staff position.
Right. That's the complete rolled up cost.
So that'd be about we'd have to get about 10% savings. I mean, right now, everything that we buy, it seems to be, 20% or 30% added on top. It would be nice to, have somebody be able to go out and find out what other towns have and see if we can piggyback on them. I mean,
Right.
Scottsdale's got a lot more buying power than we do. Phoenix does, Chandler, Gilbert. It just seems that we pick the most expensive one, not by choice,
Right.
just because we don't have the research.
Just on the math, it's 1% the way it work on 15 million.
Yeah, okay, 1%.
Yeah.
But
But you're right. And that would be, I would say that's a good metrics.
We definitely need a procurement officer. I'm fully supportive of what she said.
I think the caveat you put on it is a good idea if we can do it. And I think, as I said, skill set. We need someone who can bring that together.
The other aspect to look at would be the efficiencies of your other directors and staff members. If you can demonstrate some cost savings and that their personnel time is dedicated to other projects, then that supports it as well.
Okay.
It sounds like you had a consensus. Look, Tom, you can join it. We don't need
We
a
kind of
vote.
missed the discussion yesterday.
Well, I don't wanna, I listened with interest to what the mayor said because I thought his challenge for demonstrable proof of the need of the FTE was very legitimate. On the other hand, I don't want to micromanage the
Right.
challenge that you have before you. I'm more concerned at how many FTEs we have in the town. I'm more concerned at how much last year's 52 million is going up this year. I wonder what our flexibility is if there is an economic slowdown. Once we approve this, I know it's adjustable to some extent, but at the end of the day, and I know I come from the dinosaurs, but 5,500 people, what we're spending per every man, woman, and child in the community is pretty extraordinary. Now, you could argue that it's worth it for the quality of life people enjoy here, that you're not going to get this on the cheap. But with Carefree next door, people always make that comparison. And, they can meet in the school bus, but we have to meet into a small meeting room when we have our staff meetings. So, but I don't want to pre-guess.
I think that we always need to remind our community that we have a water utility and a fire department. And all of that requires oversight, which other towns do not have. Our water utility comprises about half of our employees. So that's the reason that we have more employees
And the
than
fire department's
Carefree.
20%, another 20%.
Yeah, I didn't
I
even
mean,
count the fire department in the total.
These are the hard truths
Yeah,
that we all have to wrestle with. Why we have more employees than our neighbor and why it costs more.
well, I'm not speaking against what you said, Catherine, and Dusty's
just the
analysis.
facts.
But all I'm saying is that we are sliding towards bigger and bigger government every fiscal cycle. And another argument for me, at least look at privatizing the water company. It just seems like, regardless of other reasons that people have voiced, it's gonna break the bank. We can't keep spending these millions and millions and millions of dollars to make water safe and potable for the people that live here. And 5,500 people, I don't know what that factors out. And I know it's a municipal responsibility, water is the source of everything, but I just don't know what we are spending in relation to what is cost and value back to the people that live here. So, I mean, it's an organic moving scale. And again, I would argue, kind of parallel to your situation, that if you're too small to be a city of Scottsdale and city of Phoenix, then you have to do everything yourself. So you have to create one position to do something because they have 15 positions to do something. It's just, and I'll just say one thing in passing is that the $100,000 we're spending on static well measurements, I guess, and Catherine knows that she's been around here. Joe Brunier used to do it for free. We had others that used to do it for free. Wasn't scientific, wasn't official, but it's so funny how we used to go from more of a volunteer participation, and I don't mean like we have now, but I mean people taking their specialties and contributing a product for value. We knew every year on the council and the staff what the static water levels were at representative testing places. And we're not spending $100,000 on the testing. We're spending, I think, on the interpretation of the testing results. And it's interesting that DWR doesn't do that for the town like they should. So I'm arguing with you, but in a very awkward way.
No, I
that,
get it. My husband used to test the wells. He'd stick his hand
Yeah.
down in the holes. So yeah, that was how much our volunteers have done in the past, but it's a different world. And we are getting more accurate with the way that we're conducting our water utility. We lost a lot of water through leakage because we didn't have a scientific method of calculating what people were using. So now we are. So it goes both ways. To be more professional, you're making steadfast progress in how well we're managing our water supply, which is essential.
Water is essential.
I think we've got the consensus and we know what we need to do. What I wanted to find out is based on yesterday and today, what any other feedback or input from the council, or is there anything obvious to you that might be missing? You do have the fiduciary responsibility as the governing body of the town of Cave Creek. So, and also you also are closer to the pulse of the community as far as your constituents. So is there anything that you're aware of or think that we should address that maybe our budget is not addressing for next fiscal year?
I would anticipate some public pushback on the expenditure to remodel the town hall building and to rehab that. And one question I have would be, we've spent some in this fiscal year for the property and the planning for the cost to actually do the remodeling. Can that be spread over the next 2 fiscal years? Is the timing of it such that it could be lengthened out, or would that not be a reasonable project?
It's a reasonable question, and what we're looking at is the renovation and remodeling would be part of an expansion of the current building. So, and it really needs to be kind of done together, because what we're looking at doing is the wing that would be added will help with the staging to do what we need to do before we can go back to the old section and do the updating and remodeling and such. And I think the thing that we're gaining out of this that we don't have now, it's not just a remodel. I mean, you've been in the space, you know what I'm
Right.
saying, but that's how most of the residents would characterize that. We don't have training rooms. We don't have a space for the mayor or the council to meet with your constituents. That's a pretty common thing in other cities. And we're not talking, when I say cities, I'm not talking like large cities. I'm just talking like other small towns. And I'm not saying every council member getting each, their own office, but it's pretty common for the mayor to have an office, because usually the mayor takes a lot of the feedback from residents and the meeting in person. But the thing that we're really missing is you've been in our conference room. It's not really big enough for our purposes that we have. We also don't have, training rooms. We have a really abnormally large kitchen in proportion to the rest of the space. Those are all things that I think all have to be addressed. And I think the space plan that was put together, they're trying to figure out a way to do it so we don't have to bring in like double wides and have to pay for leasing and double wide. So I think the way that we've got the staging works the best the way it is. And I think that this environment we're in right now, we keep seeing cost escalation on construction. So I think the longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to get. And so, but again, it's a council policy discussion, and it's up to the council ultimately to decide
So
on
one
that.
thing that would help is where are people located now? And what is the shortfall?
Right. So I actually wrote down your question, and I
mean,
think I
because
didn't have
that's
the
the
ability to
first
answer that
question
right then
people
and
are
there.
gonna ask.
Right.
Why do I need a new building? You know, you've been crammed in here all these years. I mean, you need to make a case for, here's
Right.
why I've got to expand.
Yeah.
I get the training, I get the conference rooms, no problem with that.
I mean, we can't even, we had a meeting with the Estados de Choya residents, and we could not properly meet with them. We had to come in here, which wasn't bad, but again, it was not an ideal kind of an arrangement. We couldn't fit them in the regular conference room.
But it would
So-
help to actually lay out, here's where everybody is right now. Here's
Right.
the shortfall.
Right. I
was
agree,
under-
and
I was
wrote
under
that
the
down.
impression we're waiting to see what the sheriffs want to do.
No, that space over there, we really need to have the adjacencies with each other, because what you saw at the retreat really shows where we can maximize the working together with each other. And if you do that and we're splitting each other up, it's not going to be an efficient use of the space, or because we're so small. You know, it's not like, like a city of Phoenix or Scottsdale where they could just move a whole group to a different building. We're also wearing multiple hats that we really all need to be in the same, contiguous space together. So fair question. And I think that's something we could take a look at, but I would tell you, I think whether it's done next year with the design and we come back with costs, I think that's probably a better thing to wait to get the design done. And then council ultimately can make that decision on the second year, because really the construction and remodeling is in the second year of the CIP.
Thank you.
I have some summary comments that I
Sure.
want to make.
Okay.
So we don't forget the big picture.
Right.
We're a big water company was hooked onto a small town. And the small town's general fund is funding the wastewater ad infinitum, and has funded residents who don't even live here, and has subsidized the water companies. And no matter how many times we think we solved that problem, we're back in it. We had $1.5 million. It went for 3 years, and no one saw that we were running short. That's a real ding on the corporate management of the town, is that we're not watching close enough. We cannot, on our project management, we are not using the best practices that people have found other places to keep those projects under control, and we have out of control projects. So we've got to get project work and investment work done at the lowest possible price, consistent with safety and a project that works. And we've got to get the general fund is decreasing. The amount, it's the sales tax ramp up is over. And now we've got everything, it looks down, and we've got this massive need for water just to supply our customers. So getting the water companies out of the general fund is the solution for the general fund. We've got to get those subsidies. We've got to make sure we have economics on expanding the sewer system. I mean, if it costs too much to expand, you can't afford to do it. But we're a small town that's all spread out over everywhere, and we've got all these legacy issues with why we ever bought Desert Hills, and they have the water. If we didn't have them, we wouldn't be looking at Bartlett dams and Harquahala. So we just need to keep all these factors that are interrelated and get these businesses separated, so we simplify what we're doing and do a good job on the things that we undertake. This budget, I'm frankly nervous about, because you've got 5% increase in spending on a 2% increase in revenue. That's not, and using the reserves for that is a place I'm not going to go. We need to spend that money on capital projects like water or anything else, or even buildings. So I think we've got to really do a good job this coming year in efficiency and cost control. And making sure that those water companies, that this projection on being out of the subsidy business actually happening, that ought to be a real focus of town, is to make sure that happens in this year.
Mayor, I think those are great comments, and I think we're working towards that. I can't explain. I mean, I'm here for one of those years that you mentioned, but it went back to 22, where the audited financials show that we did not meet the estimated revenues, did not meet the budgeted revenues. So I'm committed. I know Sherry's committed. Sean is committed to working with Wildan to get the rates where they need to be, and we're going to use realistic numbers. But we're also committed to trying to get the general fund loans that have been paid over the last 4 years paid back to the general fund. We're also committed to try to not have as much pain to the utility customers, because what you saw looked very painful. So we're gonna, as I mentioned to you, sharpen our pencils, spend some time, give you options so that you're not having to make all the tough decisions. We're gonna give you some recommendations to spread that out. Same thing as we talked about the impacts of the dry sewers and trying to get the customers on there. Clearly, they have to pay their way, but we also need to do what we can to try to get them on in a reasonable fashion. So, yes, I've heard everything you've said. The other thing I just wanted to remind the council was that one of the things that we made a change for next fiscal year had to do with previously funding streets in the capital fund, or as capital projects. Everything was a capital maintenance project. And so what looks like, was it 2.5 million or so on
2.2.
I didn't catch it.
2.1, 2.2.
2.1, 2.2. What looks like 2.1, 2.2 going to the operating budget. That's 2.1, $2.2 million that is actually from reserves going to streets. That was a policy direction we received last year. It's something being done on paper. It's not, and it's the best practice. If you looked all around the different cities, they never fund any of their street projects in capital unless it's truly a new street, a widening, a bridge, a culvert, and then a road over it. So I think we're doing the right things here. Also, just to let the council know, and I want to remind the council that we've been able to find and sustain at least $250,000 a year going forward, starting next fiscal year, on employee benefit savings. That's going to continue to build. We also have found another thing that I'm not going to get into right now, but another operating expense related to employee benefits that we'll be bringing forth to you, a proposal that I believe over time, it's another $200,000+ a year going forward. So these are things that I'm looking, because I'm always looking at efficiencies, because that's when I see something that doesn't look right, I question it. And it's like, I just to make sure I'm seeing this right. And this one thing I will be bringing to you shortly, I think we've got a good fix for it. And so we'll seek your direction on helping us fix that. But the point is, we're trying to find other operational savings, because I think that's my job and the staff's job. And at the same time, we want to make it a great place for employees to work, and that our benefits and pay are commensurate with our competition. So were there any other questions or comments before we close?
Thank you.
Yes.
I apologize. I wasn't here yesterday, but I heard a report. I just wanted to ask you that there's a meeting tentatively scheduled for May 19th. And it has to do, I think it's a presentation by Luke, and it has to do with state lands and so forth.
Yeah, so
Is that
what
a
we've
firm
talked
date?
about is we are bringing forward to council a state trust land strategy on how to address state trust land and possible acquisition. That's going to be an open meeting. It'll be
It's a council meeting? Okay.
But you weren't here, but
Right.
we're planning an election.
That's what I wanted to hear, just a tad of that more. So there
Right.
will be an opportunity for the council to vote whether or not to put this on the November 2026 ballot to see if the community wants to consider, like we did with Spur Cross, a temporary tax on their
Right.
best valuation for the purpose of purchasing, and then at that time, you're going to discuss numbers and projections.
So I've also, just to let you know on that matter, and we'll go into more detail on that meeting or at that meeting. But I've worked with Teresa and Bo on kind of developing, going backwards from an election as to key dates and when we have to notify the county of our intent to hold that election, and then the public information sessions, when things have to be published, like the publicity pamphlet, all the materials that we need to put out to the public. So we're working on that schedule, and it'll be something, I don't know if it'll be ready. It should be probably ready in the next month or so. So we could share that as well.
I think this is huge because it folds into the culture of this budget preparation and budget review in terms of it's as important as the budget because it's not a commitment to spend money under discussions that have been had here before, but it's a commitment to ask the council to publicly discuss this and review the details. And if the council supports it, to suggest it to the voters next November. So I think it's really significant in terms of timing. And I don't want to bother you anymore with my repetitive browbeating, but I really think this is the last chance for the community to acquire, if it so chooses, something of this size and importance and magnitude. And many people don't realize that a lot of the lands proposed for preservation are within many of our windows that you would look north and see that otherwise would be disposed of differently. So if there were a map today on the wall showing people where these lands would be protected, they're not really abstract, distant horizon pieces. They are critical infill, some of which I think the Land Trust supports. Some are as close as north as the project where you live, Arizona, Bob. So it's a completion of a painting or a mosaic. So many years later, but kind of timeless in terms of an enormous availability. And it'll be curious. And the beauty of this is if the community has the same passion and interest that it did years ago when they took this very same methodology. By the way, don't let David Phelps tell you it's only going to cost 2 gallons of milk. That's what he did last time per month. Oh, okay. Because that's how he sold this all over the town.
I think he's using the eggs now as his.
The eggs. But it really, to me, it's a great bookend for the budget. Because whatever content value in the budget, which speaks to the culture of Cave Creek, this is a perfect accompaniment, not only in terms of the methodology, but the timing.
Right.
So I am so excited that maybe it shows that I think that there's a lot of wisdom up here that like this was your suggestion, Bob, I think a few months ago, to launch the same approach as was last time to see if people would do a
Well, I think
self-assessment.
it's been bubbling on a lot of minds, I
Yeah.
think.
So that's just a big deal, I think, on the May 19th, and it makes the budget feel more like a complete package. So
Full agreement, Tom.
I just like to say about staff, this is the best work I've seen on the budget. The presentation, Sherry, you did a magnificent job, and Bridget, I guess maybe you put some of that in, so congratulations, both of you.
He did a lot behind the
There's a
scenes.
lot going into this, and I think we've got the best staff going, and the former mayor is coming in, but we have a tremendous, we have a tremendous staff, and it shows here, and I just want to thank you all for being here. We do want to maintain the kind of quality staff that can do this kind of work, and I'm proud of our town. I'm proud of our town government.
Awesome. Thank you.
Now that the meeting's over, look who showed
Yeah.
up.
So I do have, Mayor, I do have another slide here. So
Oh,
the upcoming budget dates, so these are the next steps in the process. So May 19th is when we would be asking council to approve the tentative budget. The tentative budget is what sets the cap. So when we come back for final budget adoption, we can shift things around and keep it at the same amount. If something happens, we're like, oh, we can reduce the amount, but we cannot increase it.
So the tentative
cap-
budget is the limit? Is that right?
That's the cap.
That's the cap.
So we need to make sure that it's going to cover whatever we need, and final budget cannot
This-
exceed that.
But
Okay.
this budget covers it. I can't imagine anything else.
We're annexing, Cherry, aren't we?
Yeah, we're gonna add Cherry Creek
Yeah, right.
and then open space it and preserve it.
I would sell that in order to get our open space.
We need to adjourn, with no further business on the agenda, meeting adjourned.
Can I just
Yep, go ahead.
state something? There might be a possibility of rescheduling the meeting that is set on the water strategy workshop. So right now we have it set for the 28th of April, which is a Monday. Just to let you know, I don't think when we put it on your calendars, we also anticipated that there would be an e-session. There's some information we need to share with you that can only be discussed in an e-session. So is there anybody absolutely has an issue with the 28th? I just need to find, or I'm sorry, with the 21st. That was originally the meeting that we had to council.
What
So,
time?
do you recall the meeting time?
That's next week.
I know.
It is.
Yeah.
It
It was
is.
the
Yeah.
council meeting that was
Next
canceled.
Monday.
Yeah, I have a
Oh,
conflict
oh,
with
oh.
that.
Okay. That's good to know then.
Just maybe I can change, but I don't know.
Okay. We'll let you know no later than tomorrow morning on this.
What
Just-
time would that be on the 21st?
Was it 4 o'clock?
Yeah, okay.
No, I'm talking about the workshop that was on the 28th. Rehaving it go Monday. Okay. We think it's probably 4 o'clock. It was going to only be an hour and a half. So,
So 21st.
That is such an important meeting. Because that's gonna be driving us for the next 2 years, so
So
we need to have everybody.
a lot of what we were talking today about like water resources and all that will be
I
addressed. at
can't
that
do it
meeting.
on the 21st. I've got family coming in from the East Coast.
That's right. I
I've got
forgot you mentioned
four-
that.
4 kids that are under 7
Okay.
years old, and plan on spending some time with them.
Okay. Okay. Well, sounds like there's two, so we'll have to go accordingly to the 28th.
4 grandkids. Not my kids, 4 grandkids, just to be clear.
And
Okay,
Dusty,
sure.
the Dark Skies is gonna be either May 5th or May 19th? When Dark Skies is gonna come onto the agenda?
I was thinking it was May 5th. And it all depends on the planning commission. They may have to continue it to finish it because they may have a lot of input from residents. So they may not get through it in the first meeting that they hold on this topic.